Today we're discussing every album by Godflesh, pioneers of industrial metal and one of the gnarliest metal bands of all time. Despite being a massive fan of the band God with Justin Broadrick, I have never heard Godflesh until now. And in retrospect, that seems very silly. Godflesh can be considered one of the heaviest bands of all time. I mean, easily. I think easily. And while they've remained consistently Godflesh their entire career, they have taken some pretty big swings, done some pretty unexpected and weird things throughout their career. And yeah, we're going to dive into all of it. Today I'm joined by my buddy, history guy, and PR guy, Tom Osman, who's a fellow musician, podcaster, and music journalist who writes for New Noise magazine. And he is a gigantic Godflesh fan, and he needed to be the one to guide me down this journey. For those of you who are new here, we play a little game at every album ever. We go through every record and we divvy up our picks for best, personal favorite, worst, and least favorite. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there are agreements, most of the time there are not. And the last thing I want to note before jumping into the episode is this episode was decided by Patreon. Godflesh handedly won one of our polls by completely destroying the other two bands that were on the poll with it. I throw up a new poll every month and you guys decide which artist gets a full discography episode like this one. You could also suggest episodes, join the Discord. There's a bunch of cool stuff that go to the Patreon. Okay, Godflesh has 1,001 albums and a bunch of remix albums and a bunch of dub albums and a lot of bonus tracks and dub remixes. It's one of the most complicated discographies I've seen in a minute, and I wouldn't know where to start. Tom has decided what we're covering today. He'll talk about his reasons why in more detail, but today we're covering 13 records. That's 9 albums and 4 EPs. The first EP came out in 1988 and the last album came out in 2023. However, Justin Broadrick has announced that there will be 2 more Godflesh albums. One of them is supposed to be out this summer, and then the next one sometime later. So expect more Godflesh on the channel when those albums come out. All right, let's get to it. This is me and Tom discussing every album by Godflesh. Who are Godflesh? I'm brand new, so tell me.
Godflesh are, I guess, for most of his musical career, the main project of Justin K. Broadrick, guitarist and vocalist and producer. Also GC Green on bass. That's essentially the core of the band. They are an industrial metal band, I suppose, essentially kind of pioneers of industrial metal, and also 2 steps removed from Napalm Death, with Justin having been one of the early, although not original members of Napalm Death, because the full changing lineups of Napalm Death is one of the most confusing things in modern music.
Oh yes. Wait, so I don't know how common this experience is, but I am super familiar and a huge fan of God because of, I mean, it's an episode that you requested years ago. I imagine most people hear Godflesh before God.
Definitely, yeah. I heard Godflesh before I heard God, way in advance. I actually only realized just a week or 2 ago, it hadn't clicked for me. There's God, there's Godflesh, and I don't know if you're aware as well, when Godflesh temporarily disbanded, Justin Broadrick formed, I don't know if they're supposed to be pronounced Jesu or Yezu. I've always thought it's Yezu, even though it's Jesu. I think it's Yezu.
I think it's Yezu because I could hear him in the song saying Yesu. The song, okay. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like 3 different aspects of God and Jesus, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm sure that's no coincidence, but no. Yeah, Godflesh, hugely influential band, hugely important.
You're the one who picked out the records that we're covering today. We are covering a lot today. So of all the EPs and all the millions of releases, what was your rationale as to which ones we didn't cover?
Okay, yeah, so I'm glad that you asked that, because I thought I should be the one to take the hit in this respect, because I'm pretty sure, I don't want to preempt things unnecessarily, but I'm pretty sure there are going to be some really hardcore, diehard Godflesh fans, and I imagine certain people are going to say, why didn't you cover this? Or why didn't you do that? Or this
always
or that.
Always are, yeah.
The disclaimer is, as people who are really familiar with Godflesh will be aware, it's very difficult to pick out like a list and to go, these are the tracks we need to cover without covering everything. And if you're going to do everything by them, it's basically impossible. Because one of the things that they like to do is they've got a number of remix albums. In fact, I think actually it's only 2. They've got 2 full dub albums, but they also have a tendency to put remixes, often dub remixes, onto albums or onto EPs. As Mike knows, because we discussed this before, there were a few EPs I wanted to include because I thought they were important. But basically, the things we're not including is we're not including the Cold World EP from 1991. And my justification for that, it's basically 2 songs plus remixes. I think that's actually basically it. And we're not doing the dub records, but I think we're doing everything else. But the other thing is we will use the original vinyl versions of the albums, so not with extra bonus tracks, which we'll get to on specific releases again, because it just spirals out of all control. Like even before you get to all the side projects and remixes and everything, just figuring out where a release starts and ends is really hard. So
it's very confusing. It's so confusing.
Apologies for anybody who has particular tracks they wanted us to cover. I take full responsibility for that, but I just had to try and make a decision of what made sense to include and not to include. So we can probably, as we get to the releases, I can make a reference of stuff we're not covering, but you got to draw the line somewhere, particularly for Mike, who'd never listened to Godflesh before and went into all of this, which is madness.
Most of the stuff that we're not covering are dub remixes. That's what it looks like. I did listen to a couple. I did listen to some to know, to have an idea what I was missing. I'm glad we didn't listen to the whole thing. I don't like dub. Okay, that's just me. I don't like dub.
Well, there's one thing, that incidental thing that I thought, I'm not qualified really to talk about this, but I thought it'd be interesting for people listening to this. I know that Justin Broadrick, probably GC Green as well, is a huge Killing Joke fan. Apparently, the dub idea came from listening to Killing Joke doing dub mixes.
Interesting.
So my question out there for the dub faithful, who does dub better, Killing Joke or Godflesh?
Hey, fair question.
But the one thing I did want to ask you, because I've been looking forward to doing this and I've been looking forward to finding out your reaction. So from my point of view personally, in terms of all the stuff we're covering, I don't think they've got a bad release. I think they've got a couple of releases that have got kind of significant flaws. I think they've got a couple of like near perfect releases, and I think they have a lot of really great stuff. What is your overall feeling about the catalog of Godflesh now that you've been soaking in it for a while?
They stink. I'm kidding. No, I love them. I feel almost exactly the same as you, where there's 2 records that I think I can do without those 2, one more than the other. At least, I would say 3 or 4, I think incredible, like damn near flawless, just amazing. And then the rest I like a lot. But also they do, you can't say they do one thing, because they do a bunch of things that's really confusing at times, or really left field, but never in a million years does it not sound like Godflesh. Even when they go off the deep end with like full-on hip-hop stuff and techno stuff, it's still very recognizably Godflesh, which I think it's a cool thing. I think it's a great thing.
One of the things that's interesting about Godflesh, and I've probably put this in the notes somewhere, is that at various different points, Justin Broadrick has commented that he had and he has a vision for Godflesh as being something that's quite, I've forgotten exactly what the words are, but it's like he doesn't want it to be complex and elaborate and evolving. So actually, when they go through their period where they do change a fair bit, from various quotes I've seen from him, he wasn't very happy with the fact that they were experimenting, and he felt that the sound of Godflesh should be more pure, pun partly intended. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind when they have the break and Justin goes off to do Yazoo, at least as his main project. When they come back, I think they come back with a principle of, right, what is Godflesh about? Let's focus on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never, well, not never, but I very rarely hear of a band where their goal is to not evolve. I mean, I suppose it's less uncommon in metal bands, because it's kind of a, the running joke for Motorhead and Slayer type stuff where, AC/DC, whatever. Yeah, they do the same thing and they have no intention of changing. But it's also funny to me to hear be like, I don't want to evolve. We're going to do the same shit. All right, this is what it is. We're going to do it for 35 years.
I've also found as well, like, it really, how much I enjoy these different releases really varies. Yeah, from that like personal favorite, least favorite, it's really hard to hold on to. I can well imagine that my picks would change. But like I say, I'm pretty firm in what I think is the best and the worst Godflesh.
Fair enough. So starting from the beginning of the band, how did they form? What's the deal there?
The history that I've got here, I've taken from Godflesh.com. I think that this is an official website. I'm not actually sure who wrote this history, because although we had the situation with Amoebics, where the Baron was writing in the third person, I don't...
Yeah.
I don't think this is Justin writing this, but Justin K. Broadrick was born in 1969 in Birmingham, England. At the age of 12, he began recording his own solo material under title Final. This project was mainly noise and Justin screaming into a microphone. Justin met BC Green and Paul Neville, both from Birmingham, in 1983. They asked him to join their band Fall of Because on drums. He accepted.
So you say they're fans of Killing Joke.
Spot the reference. Yes. Yeah. Also, as well, are you aware that Justin is a massive Leonard Cohen fan?
No, that's pretty funny, hearing the band.
I don't know how well you know Leonard Cohen, but you may notice as we go through, there are certain references to Leonard Cohen in song titles, album titles, and indeed record label titles.
I'm embarrassingly unfamiliar with Leonard Cohen. It's a whole rabbit hole I have not dived down yet.
You'll get round to it, and then one day you'll look back at this and you'll be like, oh, those were the Leonard Cohen references.
Godflesh.
In May of 1985, Justin met Nicholas James Bullen at a record store. Sharing the same interests, Justin learned that Nick had a project called Napalm Death. Mm-hmm. Justin then joined playing guitar for the project. At this time, the drummer was named The Rat, or Nicholas Ratledge. This lineup recorded their first demo, Hatred Surge, in 1985.
First of all, it's 85. It's way early, and it's already super confusing. Like, this is still not even Godflesh yet.
Rumor has it that the Rat later had a mental breakdown and was admitted into a mental institution, or that he turned into a Buddhist monk.
The Rat, you say, had a mental breakdown or became a monk?
Maybe he didn't like people calling him the Rat. Upon his departure, Mick Harris joined the band, and this is the lineup that recorded part of what would later become the Scum album in 1986. During this time, Justin played with both bands, and that same year, Fall of Because released their first demo, Extirpate.
Extirpate. Interesting.
Whatever that means. This demo contains a few songs that would later become Godflesh tracks, which we will get to later.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Scum. I haven't heard that album since I was a teenager. I mean, that's like a pretty big time grindcore pioneering album. I really been meaning to go back to it.
Do you remember that the band in side A and the band in side B is completely different?
I did not know that. No, that's crazy. Already within the same album, they couldn't even keep one lineup. That's insane.
So I think Justin's on the first half, but he's not on the second half. So in late 1986, early 1987, remember at this point, Justin is only about 17 years old. Taking his influences, Swans, Early Killing Joke, SPK, Suicide, The Stranglers, Black Sabbath, and especially Throbbing Gristle, he looked to create a band that would take the sounds of all his favorite bands and slow them down like a 45 record played at 33.
Now that's sounding like some Godflesh now.
And then finally, the day that Justin left Head of David, he asked BC Green to rejoin Fall of Because. At that time, Justin decided that he could express the sounds that he wanted to create better while playing guitar. So he resumed, and they changed the name from Fall of Because to Godflesh. Oh, and as it doesn't say there, they then also used a drum machine.
Oh, yeah. They use the drum machine. So Ripple one of the through lines of Godflesh. I was expecting that, they got a drum machine, earliest stages, Jesus Lizard first EP, you get a drum machine, then they land on a drum. They have like 2 albums with a drummer on it. Like, it's mostly the drum. It's like, it's their thing.
It is their thing indeed. Yeah. For better or for worse, which we will no doubt get into over the course of discussing these releases.
Indeed. So we might as well get into the actual records since we have so many to cover. So 1988's self-titled EP. I literally don't know where to start. It's cool.
I am gonna come out of the gates hot here, and I am gonna say personal favorite.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that. I thought this was a very, very great introduction to the band.
And I was laughing to myself when I finally decided I was going to give this personal favorite. So it's a very Mike thing to do, to give the very first release personal favorite.
Yeah, or best. Something like that.
I think that the first EP has got something that you can't get on any other Godflesh records. I think there's a certain kind of rawness and a vulnerability that you can hear on it that is gone by the debut record. It's a lot of the vocals, like he's got several sort of vocal modes that I think he tends to work between. He's got the sort of the pained, soaring, sort of shoegazy drifting wails. He's got the growls, and he's got a kind of like a kind of creepy spoken style he does as well. There's probably something else in there that I've forgotten, but those are kind of like main modes of his. And there's a lot of the sort of pained wailing on this one. There is a bit of the growling as well, as we'll get to later on. Sometimes I don't think the drum machine sound really fits with the production that they've got on the guitars. And in other times, I think like the bass doesn't sound as prominent as I'd like it to be. But on this one here, I think it's got a perfect mix of the drum machine, the bass. The bass is like really deep and resonant, mean sounding. And I like the way that the vocals are floating on top of it a lot of the time. I like the squealing guitars. I think it's just all fits together. Like they sort of hit the ground running, and like with a sound, you're like, this is a great sound. And I love all of the tracks as well. So yeah, one thing that I will say, which again may upset purists, I quite often find going through the Godflesh catalog that there'll be stuff that I love on an album, but by the end of it, I'm just like, that was a bit overlong. So
Very long albums.
The EP being a bit shorter, I think it doesn't overstay its welcome. Everything sounds great. All the tracks are memorable. I
would agree with pretty much all that. The EPs especially, I think all the EPs, I think there's only one EP where I think it's like, oh, that one's not as good as the others. This is, I think, a really, really cool introduction. And you're talking about the bass. One of the first things that stuck out to me on Veins, the song Veins, where it hit me like, oh yeah, God, that's that incredible dirty bass tone that I love. I mean, GC wasn't in God to my knowledge, and I'm surprised that God wasn't mentioned in the backstory, but it's still a very similar tone.
I think because God came later, because God was in the early 90s.
Okay, I'm misremembering then. So Godflesh was before God, interesting. But the same dirty bass tone, there's a certain point on a later album where the bass tone is, I think, my favorite bass sound ever. It's just the most satisfying, punishing, fat, but also with a lot of punch and a lot of dirt on it. They just do bass absolutely perfectly. Even when it's not dirty, it still has this really, really gnarly heaviness to it. But that's the first thing that stuck out to me here, where it really reminded me of God. And then the drum machine, it's so 1988, where it's not hiding from the fact that it's a fucking drum machine. And that gives it this nice, obviously industrial feel for sure, but it reminded me a lot of early Nine Inch Nails, where it's not shy about the fact that they're using a fucking he was using an 808, I think. I don't know what they're using here, but it's not shying away from the fact that, yeah, this is primarily used in hip hop, but we're doing this with it. And that confidence, I think, really creates, I don't know, I mean, you can see why it pioneered a whole subgenre.
So apparently what they're using on this release is an Alesis HR16.
I'm going to pretend I know what that is, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, I'm having a look at a picture. It looks like a fax machine. I think, as I sort of alluded to before, I think at some points, the limitations of the drum machine sometimes stick out as a negative. But there's something about the sound of this one where it's like, yeah, the drum machine is dated, but it feels like it works that way. It doesn't make me listen to this album and go like, oh, the whole thing feels dated. It's like, it feels like it's an intentional sort of tonal quality to it. And I just think that it just works really well. There's something cold and grim about the tone of this record, and the sound of the drum machine really adds to that overall tone from my point of view.
In movies and music and all kinds of stuff, there's a weirdly fine line between funny and scary, or like silly and scary, which is an interesting little line that I appreciate. That's what this kind of reminds me of. Like, oh, these are kind of dorky sounding drum machines, but in this context, it feels like a little bit more fucked up and wrong, and that makes it more cool than it does any kind of I don't know, silly or gimmicky.
Yeah, I want to ask you a specific question. So, Godhead, what does it remind you of?
Big and butchery? Aside from it being extremely brutal, I'm not sure.
To me, I hear, am I going to get the right way around? God, Sex, God by Swans from Children of God.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I have to compare those two now.
And this is a thing that is going to be a bit of a running theme for me, that Swans and Killing Joke associations end up being a little bit of a negative for me. Because, like, if you think about Swans, for example, I think Godflesh do draw a lot from 80s Swans, but the drum machine can't replicate that physical impact of the real organic drum kit. And so, despite what I've said about this EP and that I think it totally works with it, it is a little bit, when I hear a track like that and it makes me think of Swans, it does kind of make me go, yeah, the drums here are not quite as heavy as they are there. But at a certain point, I do kind of say to myself, well, you know, the heaviness, like the physical heaviness of the drum doesn't necessarily have to dictate how, like, overall heavy in tone the music can be altogether. So, like, it's maybe a slightly different type of heaviness.
Yeah, I was catching that as the albums went on, that the heaviness is so centered around bass and guitar, mostly bass probably, but it's so centered around that the drums are only there in some instances to just keep the beat. Like, all of the punishing qualities are coming from everything else, which, yeah, if you're comparing it to like a Swans thing where so much of the power comes from the drums, or I mean any plenty of other bands, I guess. But yeah, I think it works fine. I didn't end up feeling like, oh, I wish that drum was louder. I wish that drum was heavier. Because if you're listening to Godflesh and hoping it's more heavy, you got other issues to worry about. This is plenty heavy. It's great.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think in general, like, yeah, turning the drum machine up wouldn't add to the quality of the music, because then you just have, like, yeah, there's not enough interest in the drum machine to make it more prominent. It's
there to keep a beat. It's very, very simple stuff, especially when something as sludgy as this. You're not really listening to drums for these. I mean, they do interesting beats every now and then, but you're not listening to sludge for, like, crazy, unique drumming and percussive stuff and fills. You're listening to sludge drums to keep the sludge going. Yeah. So this is a great introduction EP. What's some of the backstory behind this?
Not a huge amount. So in the history, just says Ben and Justin then bought a drum machine and began recording for their first release, which came sometime later in 1988. This recording and all future recordings were done at Avalanche, which is actually Justin's studio. And Avalanche is also a Leonard Cohen song later covered by Nick Cave on his covers album.
Indeed.
You may recognize it from.
Absolutely.
6 songs were recorded and released under the title of Godflesh through a small indie record shop, Swordfish Records. The sounds created by Godflesh were new and very creative for the time, and soon Dig Parson of Earache Records noticed them and offered them a deal with Earache. Around that time, 4 other songs were recorded and were going to be released as an EP entitled Tiny Tears, but Swordfish didn't want to take the risk of releasing anything else, and Earache urged the band to record a full length instead, something they've done numerous times and is why the anthology Will Never be released. So those 4 songs appear as bonus tracks on the next album, and I decided that we're not covering them, so blame me.
Okay, so which songs were those exactly?
So this is the Tiny Tears EP. So on the CD version of the album, this gets put on it. It was put with the original CD, but it wasn't on the vinyl, and it never got a separate release. So I decided that we should cut it, partly because I think that it doesn't really fit with what they envisaged for the debut album. Like, I think the debut album finishes without Tiny Tears where it's supposed to finish, and I think that's how the album should be judged.
Moving on to the first full length, 1989's Streetcleaner. They get signed to Earache, and what happens? What's going on here?
I'll tell you what happens. They released their best release.
Best. Yeah.
Best.
I'm giving it best too. Yeah.
I would have been intrigued if you'd said something else was best. So from your point of view, what is it that makes Streetcleaner the best Godflesh release?
It's just a supreme example of industrial metal and everything that's possibly good about that genre. It's the intense brutality, but it's extremely rhythmic. It feels addicting somehow. The repetitiveness feels addicting. I just want more of it. The riffs are super, super cool riffs with really impressive choices, really unexpected choices, really kind of innovative choices, especially when it comes to metal of any kind. Just stuff that feels so left field and so borderline experimental, more on almost like the punk, post-punk sidey things. The Killing Joke influence does make a lot of sense. It's emotive. It's devastating, but it also kicks a ton of ass. It's just insanely good. I fucking love this album.
Yeah, it's fucking amazing. And it's so visceral and heavy. You know, like I do still stick with the EP as having a special place in my heart. But that was actually, there was a certain point where I thought maybe I could give the first EP best. And then I went from listening to the EP directly to this. And I was like, you can't say that this is not the best. Like, it adds a whole extra layer of intensity to it. It sounds heavier. It sounds meaner. There is more experimentation with the tracks. They go in more interesting directions. There's like the samples as well. Like I think it might actually be on Street Cleaner. The voice is the guy that shot John Lennon.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is his name again? He's got a name that someone else famous has.
They all have 3 names. Henry Lee Lucas is not him. Lee Harvey Oswald is not him. Paul Thomas Anderson, it's not him. What the hell? I'll find out in 2 seconds. You vamp.
So I think like, although I guess part of the reason why I didn't give this personal favorite
Mark David Chapman. Mark David Chapman. Sorry.
David Chapman. There we go. No worries. Yeah, part of why I didn't give this best is that I think it comes out amazingly. So like Rats and particularly Christbait Rising. Like I remember the first time I heard Christbait Rising and just like that dun 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 boom. That depth of the bass, like, I just thought like, okay, this is the greatest thing ever when I first heard that. And loads of the tracks are standouts. It's got a couple, like everything on it is good, but maybe like Head Dirt, Mighty Trust Crusher, Life is Easy are not so bowled over by. So it dips a little bit for me at certain points, but the rest of the tracks I think are amazing. The title track is amazing as well. And I like as well how they do. Oh, actually, no, hang on a minute. Street Cleaner is not the last track. It's Locust Furnace.
Yeah.
I like how they mix it up between the tracks. I think it's got a good flow. I like the spoken word stuff that comes in before Street Cleaner. I think it's very atmospheric.
I actually do love Head Dirt. What other ones did you mention? Mighty Trust Crusher. Fucking, god damn, it's so good. Life is Easy. I mean, I do love every song, but there's certain stuff like Dream Long Dead where I am amazed. That's the kind of shit that I'm talking about where I've never heard a riff like that before. It's this, I mean, all the bass on this album is brutal, but this brutal bass with these anguished, dissonant guitar chords, it's completely demented. They're almost disturbing. And it feels so fucking twisted and grimy, but it hits hard. It feels, it kicks so much ass.
Yeah. In Dream Long Dead, there's a kind of a stomp that comes in about 2 minutes, which is really satisfying. I really enjoy that part. And like all of the first 4 tracks, like Rats, Christbait Rising, Pulp with the rat-a-tat-tat march that it's got.
Yeah.
And Dream Long Dead. I mean, but even the other ones I'm not so keen on. It was just like I was kind of trying to figure out what like the peaks were for me. But all the other tracks that I mentioned that I'm not so keen on, I still think they're great tracks. I don't think there are any duds on this. And for that reason, I ultimately had to give it best because it sounds great. It's really, really nasty and mean and heavy. And it's very consistent and it flows really well too. It's got a lot of variety.
Yeah. There's like songs like Devastator where it almost sounds Neubauten-y with all like the group chants and the tribal drum stuff, and it's just there's just enough of that kind of peppering in of really unexpected little touches that it's still all very heavy, it's all very brutal, but there's enough little deviations in there to keep the flow going, to keep it really engaging. The riffs, man, the fucking riffs. Street Cleaner, how cool is that? Such great riffs. I love it. Unbelievably good. I love it.
Do you know where the cover image is taken from?
I do not. I was looking. I mean, I like the cover a lot, but I was having trouble. It looks like a bunch of crucifixes. I can't tell exactly.
You know that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where he's like pointing at the TV because he recognizes himself?
Yeah.
I had one of those moments when I saw where this came from because I had no idea and I just watched the movie that is a still from, and it came to one. It's like, oh, holy fucking shit! It's the Godflesh cover. It's from Altered States. It is a movie.
It's a great movie
with William Hurt. I think it was his first movie. Ken Russell as well, who always does mental movies, but one of his best movies, I would say. Yeah, it's a hallucination scene that he has. It's just, and it's only there for like a couple of seconds in the movie. But yeah, great choice.
Yeah, very cool. The bonus tracks here, this is the Tiny Tears EP that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually did listen to these, yeah.
Okay, so I must admit, I've maybe incidentally heard them some way down the line, but I haven't listened to them recently. So what was your take on the Tiny Tears tracks?
Not obviously not as much as the album, and putting at the end of the album elongates it and makes it a little bit more exhausting and tedious by the end. But on its own, I think it's still very cool. It's still definitely worth listening to. I mean, it does bridge the gap between this album and the first EP, but not in any kind of mind-blowing way where you can't believe what you're hearing. Like, it's still, you hear that EP, you hear this album, and then you hear the Tiny Tears EP. You're not getting in for too many big surprises, but I still like every song on there quite a bit.
All right, I guess I will go back and check it out at some point, but there are only so many hours in the day for sessioning Godflesh.
Oh yeah. So the release of this album, what happened here?
1 year later, the two went into the studio to record their first full-length album, Streetcleaner. It was recorded in 2 sessions with Paul Neville helping out on the second one. I'm not sure if Paul appears on the 4 bonus tracks or not, nor do I know what he was up to during the recording of the Godflesh EP. Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Thanks, Godflesh website.
They then recorded a John Peel session performing 4 songs, the last of which, Pulp, was joined by Kevin Martin. You may recognize that name from God, who's part of most recent side projects with Justin, for an amazing 10 to 15-minute version. I've actually listened to part of the John Peel sessions, and unsurprisingly, because John Peel sessions tend to sound great, it sounds really good.
Worth checking out.
The first half of 1990 saw Justin and Ben touring Europe with Napalm Death, who were beginning to gain their own following during the Grind Crusher tour. Paul Neville joined the band during the tours of this time, but he didn't play the entire shows. Justin and Ben would play half a set, and then Paul would come out to do the tracks from Streetcleaner that he appeared on. There was also a small record label called Silent Scream Records, who reissued the EP as well on LP and cassette, but they did so without consent of the band or the record labels, which is also, I think, a topic that, I don't know if it's going to come up in the notes, but there was a situation later on with Earache reissuing later albums without Justin's approval.
Oh.
So there's a bit of a side story going on there.
But we might as well move on to the next one. We have so many more left to cover, and we've already been talking for like 45 minutes. So let's move toward 1991 and the Slavestate EP. How did this get put out? What's this?
Okay, so the information we've got here for this one, Slavestate was recorded and released in 1991, and Paul Neville was with them for the entire recording. The initial release of the EP contained 4 songs. Then Slavestate remixes came out featuring 3 remixes of songs from Slavestate. Shortly after, Slate Man was released on Sub Pop Records. Earache then obtained the rights to these 2 songs and released it on CD, 7-inch and 12-inch before issuing all 3 releases together to form the Slavestate that can be found now. Originally, Justin wanted them to be kept separate, but once again, Earache got what they wanted.
A little passive-aggressive comment there.
This record was a big turning point in Godflesh's career. Up until this point, they'd been considered grindcore or even death metal. Really? Both titles that Justin wasn't happy about, and perhaps that explains such a great directional change. In
That's
any
insane.
event, that is insane. How could anyone say that the first EP was grindcore?
First rule of grindcore, be fast. I mean, that's what the hell?
Interesting. I wonder if people were just like, oh, it's the guy from Napalm Death. It must be grindcore.
Probably. It has to be. As for the actual record, what do you think about this one?
Inevitably, given that we've both said that the album is best, it's a step down for me. Part of what is disappointing for me about this one is that I don't hear much bass, so I don't like the mix so much from that point of view. I think it loses some intensity. So it is an evolution, but I think it's a step down. The first track from the very beginning, it makes me think of Pretty Hate Machine.
Yeah.
That sound. And I think all of the tracks are decent. The third track's my favorite. For me, a lot of the time apart from the experimentation period, although, okay, like if you're really, really into it, you can talk about the differences from one release to the other. And I do agree, like they do change the sound. There is a certain familiarity of sound that runs through the releases. And so quite often for me, what I latch onto is the particular production choices. Mm-hmm. And I don't really like the sound of this one so much. So that ends up being kind of a significant thing that sort of detracts from my enjoyment. You know, it's like if it sounds a bit sort of light and flimsy, It's not really giving me what I want from a Godflesh record.
Interesting. So you lean more toward the production side of things. I think I lean more toward the riffage. I do like this EP quite a bit. So you said it's a step down. I would say it's a step forward, but a step down. It is evolving. It is doing different things, and I wasn't disappointed by this. I wasn't like let down. Hearing Streetcleaner, I felt it like, oh, this one is going to be hard to top. This is probably going to be. I knew early on this is probably going to be best. It's that good. I wasn't disappointed by this one because I think because it's not trying to be that album. Because if it was trying super hard to be Streetcleaner Part 2, then I think it would be a huge letdown. This one has, well, it does have less crunchiness and punchiness with the bass, or heaviness with the bass. It's also way more electronic. It's way more melodic and shoegazy. So it's doing enough different things that make me feel like it definitely has its own personality. It doesn't need to be the other thing. And it is cool for what it is. You mentioned the title track sounding like Pretty Hate Machine. First thing I thought of was like, okay, they're full on Nine Inch Nails electronic style now, but it's not really. It's just that song.
Yeah.
Somewhere Someone Scorned. I mean, that synth bass line. I mean, it's super 80s sounding, but boy, it's just really cool. And it has just the heaviest pounding riff and drums.
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Yeah, it's great. And then there's a lot of the textures are really surreal and scary, like on Perfect Skin. It's got these siren sounding guitars that have a real pain to them. And yeah, and then Meltdown is just utterly disgusting, hideous sludge. And it's very interesting because around 2 minutes in, it goes into this really nice, really good melodic and melancholy part. It's like sludge industrial grunge. It's yet another thing I was not expecting, another type of deviation from just industrial metal. I think it works pretty well for what it is.
I'm glad that you dig it, and that was sort of why I wanted to include these extra EPs, because I thought they do justify their existence. You know, like, I don't dislike this. It's definitely, I'm not putting it as worst or least favorite, but yeah, it's got some elements I'm not so keen on, but I do appreciate what you say, that like it's a step forward but a step down. It is doing something different they haven't done before. One thing I did think with the second track, Perfect Skin, when I listened to that track, I think like if Typo Negative played this with the band that they've got, although there is that whole thing about Josh Silver basically like taking the drums and then making artificial drums out of the original drums on most of the albums. But somehow when I listen to that track, I think like, yeah, you could make this into like a big trudging Typo Negative track, and having that grander sonic scope would make it a better track. But that's a little bit unfair to be looking back 35 years after the fact and going, I wish Typo Negative recorded that song.
Yeah, fair enough. Imagine Peter Steele singing this stuff. But yeah. Moving on to the next one,
So just to say, at this moment, this is where we are skipping Cold World, because as mentioned at the beginning, it's 2 songs plus remixes. So it's a bit of a stretch. Okay,
so Cold World was 91. And so we're skipping that to go to 1992's Pure, the second full length. And we're how long into this episode? We're barely at the second album. So what happened here? What's up with this album?
Okay, so Pure and Cold World were recorded at the same time in September, October of 1991. Cold World was released in 1991, and Pure coming out in April of 1992. These releases showed the world yet another side of the ever-changing Godflesh sound. Justin was very unhappy with the production of this release, as it was recorded on an 8-track and provided him with fuel to make the band better and to once again change their direction.
So he wasn't happy with this one, I mean, at least production-wise.
Yeah. Now, this one's really interesting for me. This is where I was going to be a massive contrarian and draw loads of hate. I was going to give this least favorite for the longest time. And then I don't know what happened, because like I've known this album for years, and it was one of these ones where I would always come to it and go like, oh, Pure, I should, every time I listen to it, I think like, I don't enjoy this as much as I think I should. And then every time I got around to it again, I think, yeah, let's listen to Pure. And I'd always be like, eh. But for some reason, a week or two ago, I listened to it again and suddenly it clicked. And I just thought like, this is amazing. Like, it's really heavy. It's different somehow. I think maybe it's just like, there's a heaviness that's different in tone to Streetcleaner, but Spite is a great opening track. There are a few tracks that, again, that I'm not so massively keen on. Like the ones that actually stood out for me, even when I wasn't so keen on the album in general, were Baby Blue Eyes and Don't Bring Me Flowers at the end, which I think are ace.
Yeah.
But when I went back to it and somehow like the sound clicked for me, then I got into it more. But I mean, I guess, you know, if we're talking about like the structure of it, it's more samey than Streetcleaner. It doesn't have the variety. It doesn't have the samples. I would say the tracks themselves tend to be more kind of like of one like mode. It is kind of a pretty cool mood in a lot of cases.
It is a very cool mood, and it doesn't have as much diversity for sure as Streetcleaner. And my problems with this album, it's a problem with the album, and that's Pure too. Obviously, that's my biggest problem with obviously it's
that
fucking 21 minutes of nothing.
So that was, again, getting into the pure confusion of this. From my point of view, I would cut out Love Hate and I'd cut out Pure 2 because they're extra CD tracks.
Maybe I misread your notes to me before we did the episode. I thought you were saying to include those because that is the ideal version of it on CD.
Sorry. I was saying the opposite.
I misread your fucking message and I listened to that shitty ass 20-minute song.
Because I think that's part of the reason why I didn't like this album at first. Like, it always left a bad taste in my mouth because I got through it, and it's like Love Hate is a weird, like, it just sort of sounds. I think the notes that I wrote in it when I did actually listen to it is like it's like swans heard at the end of a long corridor.
Yeah,
and then Pure 2 just like goes on forever, and like it ruins the enjoyment. So maybe it was partly like chopping those tracks out that allowed me to really digest the album and properly enjoy it.
Easily, I can see that. I mean, I'm thinking back to the album now, and fucking yeah, definitely, because I do like Love Hate, Slug Baiting, but it takes like 3 minutes to finally get going, and it doesn't have the same pull as the rest of the songs in the album. It makes perfect sense. Okay, chopping those two out, hell yeah, this album does rule. The only song I don't care for is Mothra. And it's track 2, so that hurts the pacing. It's because so early in the album, it hurts the pacing for me. It just feels it's kind of like a corny hard rock riff. It's still performed like a beast. It's still heavy as hell. But comparing to some of the other ass kicking riffs here, well, there's one other thing that I was a little bothered by, and it's that it's not just that Predominance sounds a fucking lot like Man in the Box by Alice in Chains, but it's that so does Monotremata. That song also sounds just like fucking Man in the Box by like two songs that sound just like Man in the Box.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that. I'll have to go back and listen to them. Predominance is one of the ones that I highlighted as a favorite of mine from the album. There's a kind of like a glistening effect in the verse that I really like. But yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to it for the Man in the Box connection. I'm sure once I listen to it, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I see what you mean.
Sorry, you probably won't be able to unhear it now. But that is one of the more solid songs too, despite that. And I even feel like there's a lot of Pantera in there with the guitar tone. Very Pantera-esque guitar tone.
Funny you should say that. It'll probably come up in the notes somewhere. Justin ended up remixing a Pantera track, I think. And I think they did also play with Pantera at a certain point. So
there it is. Yeah, not bad. You also cited Baby Blue Eyes. Easy highlight. I mean, it's just it feels great. It's got these like bizarre happy synths. With this thudding
like a
beat,
computer game.
Yeah, exactly. Like a computer game, weirdly almost comical. But again, that fine line between silly and scary, you put that thing in this crushing, punishing thing, it's just like, oh, it's fucking rules.
Yeah, that was the thing for me. Back when I wasn't enjoying the album, I'd get through it and I'd get to Baby Blue Eyes and I'd go like, yes, now this is something that I'm really into. I love the rhythm of it. It's just like really infectious, because even though the drum machines, I guess intentionally tend to be quite simple, sometimes that simplicity really works when they get a kind of like an earwormy kind of rhythm going. And I think for Baby Blue Eyes, it's definitely got that.
Yeah, so, yeah. When you get it, even Big Black did that a lot with their drum machine, where you find an interesting enough beat, loop it for an hour. It's really cool. This one also sort of introduces the quasi hip hop elements that we get with Godflesh, because that does happen with Pure or the title track, whatever. It's basically hip hop beat. And it still has everything else very Godfleshy about it. That's kind of like a nice little teaser of, oh, they're gonna start playing with that side of things and blending it with the metal.
Definitely. And I think going back to the previous EP that we covered, Slavestate, it's got that kind of dancey element in it. So there are various different things that they'll play with. We'll get into drum and bass. We'll get into some jungle. So yeah, they're not shy of drawing in different hip hop or dance elements. into the rhythms.
It's fearless, really, because that's a hell of a thing to start blending.
Yeah, and something else I should have mentioned, I don't have a specific note or a quote for it, but I should have also said that in terms of the kind of philosophy of Godflesh, I don't know if I can characterize this quite right, but I know I've read that kind of the MO of the band was it was like a critique of like machismo. So it's like they're very much sort of like conscious of masculinity and male, I don't know what you'd say, like male energy. And so they are aware of that and kind of, I don't know if you'd say playing with it, because it's like they're not postmodern or ironic or anything like that, but they're just kind of, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever said that like Godflesh is a feminist band, but I think it's like, it's a band that makes music by men who are very aware of the fact that they're men and kind of what the negative implications of that could be if they're not like living mindfully. That might sound like a weird thing to insert in the middle of this, but there's something philosophical going on for Godflesh about basically like men are sometimes pricks. So let's not forget about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, who can forget? Yeah, I mean, overall, I still think it's really good. And now that I don't have to take into account the 20-minute closer, I can safely say this is a very good album. But moving on to the next one, 1994's Selfless. Does he hate this one too?
So he does, and so do I. Least favorite.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Pow. And I didn't realize this until after I'd made that decision. I found a quote from Justin Broadrick from an interview with the Quietus in 2014, where he just incidentally says that Selfless is his least favorite Godflesh album.
Look at that. Interesting. I just guessed. I like this album, and I just guessed that.
My overall feeling about this is that you can hear the production values have gone up. It's quite slick and compressed, and I would say gated as well in terms of the way that they've done the recording. But this is where I think that the higher production values for the guitars jars with the sound of the drums. It's like they're kind of aesthetically going into a more metal sound, a more like, alternative metal of the 90s. And I just don't really buy it with the drums. And also the only track that I really think is a standout on this album is Crush My Soul. I don't think the rest of it's bad, but it's just like, it doesn't really stand out for me other than that.
That's probably, honestly, I do probably the best song. I also do like Mantra a lot. You're talking about
I quite like Mantra, but the note I wrote for myself and the question I ask for you, does it justify being 7 minutes plus long?
That's the thing with the song lengths for this band. I lost them. I didn't even notice any. The only time I noticed, because even Go Spread Your Wings, which is 24 minutes.
Yeah.
Even that one was like, oh, this is fine. I'm cool with this song. I like this song. It's good for what whereas the 20-minute thing from last one to get the fuck out of here. I think that's like the only time I noticed the length was on the last album. But talking about the higher production value, it struck me quite a bit on Bigot, where it's just the guitar tone is so much cleaner and more decipherable, more traditionally metal, like you're saying. I don't like that. It's a cool sound, but everything here, like, yeah, it's a very heavy album. It's a very heavy band, but why does it feel so fucking clean?
Yeah, I think the notes that I have on the tracks before it gets to Crush My Soul are mostly like certain reference points that it makes me think of. So in Bigot, it's the first time when I start to notice Killing Joke influences. Like a lot later on, there will be parts where in the guitar, I'm like, oh, this is like total Killing Joke territory. But there's something about the vocals in Bigot that make me think of Jazz Coleman. And then I think you're not really a prong guy, but Anything Is Mine is quite kind of prong territory for me in terms of that kind of groove metal thing. But again, going back to what I said before about associations not always being the best, when I think of prong, I think of a great groovy sound that has a real drummer. And I think this, with that kind of style, with a drum machine, just feels a bit kind of stale.
I'm glad you mentioned the groove metal, even though I haven't heard a lot of prong, but groove metal, this is every once in a while a Godflesh album will land on like, okay, this is this kind of album. This is the groove metal Godflesh album. It feels like there's so many instances where it's going in that direction, but it does feel a little off. A lot of the riffs still pretty strong. I still like this album, but the stuff that misses for me is stuff like Body Dome Light and Toll, where it's not bad on its own, but at that point, I'm really craving a little bit more variation from that kind of groovy style, and the riffs aren't so cool that I can overlook the repetitiveness of the style at that point. The same with like Body Body Dome Light, where I'm really hearing the Pantera tones all over that one. I don't hate the main riff. I don't love it. I'm just sort of lukewarm on it. I still think it's a pretty decent album, even though it feels like a decision was made when making this one. Whereas the last one kind of felt like it's still sort of doing the gradual, natural evolution from when they started. This one feels like, all right, let's do this thing now. This one feels a lot more intentional, but the execution of that intention, I think, is a little iffy.
Yeah, I think what happened here is I forget exactly what happened, or did Earache get bought out by Columbia? I can't quite remember, but somehow this is, I think, their debut and only major label release. So I think that's how the major step up in production values occurred, is that they got some major label funding behind them, and the label went, right, let's pump some money into this. And then at the end went, this isn't really what we expected. And so everyone was ultimately unsatisfied.
Yeah, sometimes more money isn't the answer. It's actually, especially with a band like this that started out so great with such a unique and kind of shitty sound.
Yeah, and another thing which harmed them was that there's a video for Crush My Soul. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's got cockfighting in it. I mean, you don't actually see it, but you see like it's in like a dingy little room, and there's people like laying money down in like some, late 1980s Jean-Claude Van Damme movie set in somewhere in East Asia. Cool video, got banned from MTV. So I guess that was a whole bunch of money that got pumped into that for nothing as well. So, maybe for some kind of unfortunate circumstances, it just didn't get the exposure that it should have got, given the budget that was applied to it. There's a bit of history that's worth getting into here. So late in 1993, Godflesh finished up parts of what would become Merciless, an EP that spanned 3 years of material. The title track was originally a Fall of Because track the band dug up. And so that's, essentially why I said that we should skip Merciless. Maybe I didn't actually write that on a list, but that was another EP that I skipped because it's basically got a Fall of Because track. It's got 2 tracks that apparently are remixes, or they don't seem to appear anywhere else. And then a track that is a remix of, I think, Don't Give Me Flowers. So again, it doesn't have 4 tracks, which are standalone material, which I kind of thought would be the cutoff point of including them. In early 1994, the band began work on the 3rd full-length record, Selfless. Merciless was released in 1994, and after some contractual problems and a long delay, Selfless was finally released in September-October. Justin says that it was his rock and roll album and that he needed to get it out of their system. They toured with Danzig and Typo Negative, a tour that gave them only 30 minutes on stage and one that wasn't as successful as Justin had wished. What do you think about that? Danzig, Typo Negative, and Godflesh.
First of all, killer lineup. I love all 3 of those bands for sure. But also 30 minutes for Godflesh? That's 2 songs. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, it's a bit rough. Godflesh toured Europe for a short time in 1995. And later that year, most of the older albums were re-released on Earache.
Moving into the next full-length from 96, Songs of Love and Hate. What happens here?
On August the 20th, 1996, after nearly a 2-year silence, Godflesh released their next record, Songs of Love and Hate, also referenced to a Leonard Cohen album.
Okay.
Although Leonard Cohen never had Songs of Love and Hate in dub. But anyway.
Oh, yeah, that's a real tragedy there.
For the first time, Justin's many side projects started to leak into their music. It returned to the drum-driven sound from Pure, and an expansion on the heavier sound of Selfless. They did a winter tour in the US with Vision of Disorder, and due to expenses, the UK tour was cancelled. While never a full-time member, Brain did not tour with the band. Brain Manta from Primus joins the band at around about this point. Okay, so it seems that, so he wasn't available for the tour, so Ted Parsons of Swans and Prong, who will come back later, did the tour. They got Brain Manta, or Brian Manta. I don't think he was actually...
Is it Mantia?
Brian Mantia. I think in Primus they call him Brain, but I think it's Brian Mantia. Yeah, for sure it's
Brain. Yeah, I know him as Brain for sure.
Well, do you know the funny thing is that I like him on this more than I like him in Primus.
100%.
The Brown album came out a year later, and Antipop
Okay.
came out 2 years later after that. So I don't know if he'd maybe already played with Primus some way down the line, but like within the catalog of Primus, I tend to think of him as being after this record.
As for this album, this is the first album where I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to love everything, but I don't love this album. This is one of my lesser favorite albums. I'm not giving it any bad picks or anything, but it is one of my lesser favorites.
I thought for a while it was going to be my personal favorite.
Really interesting.
But it just goes to show with, you know, the flying around with different opinions. At this point now, no, I definitely wouldn't say that. I think it's one of these ones where it starts and I really love the intro. I love the first track, Wake. And I think maybe it's as well because I'm disappointed by Selfless that I think like, oh yeah, now we've got a sound that I like. It's quite funky. I like the mix. It's like, it's clear, but it's not overproduced. The guitar riffing on the first track is great. So I think it kind of, it gives me an opening feeling that's really positive. But in terms of the whole album, like, yeah, there are a few tracks that stand out, but as a whole, it's definitely not at the very top for me.
It's got some moments that I would call unbearably 90s. And as much as I'm a child of the 90s and I have so much nostalgia for it, I hate a lot of that fucking techno house beat drum stuff. And a lot of the 90s rhythms I have such distaste for some reason. And you get a lot of that. We get it on Circle of Shit, even though I do like the song. We get it on Hunter, which I don't like that song. It might be one of my least favorite Godflesh songs, period.
And it's one of my favorite songs on the album.
Really? Why?
I really like the groove. And also there's a bit about 3.5 minutes in where I don't know quite how to describe it. The drums kind of amp up. I really love that kind of shift and that transition in the track. So
okay.
Yeah,
all right. Fair enough.
It's a standout for me, but it's not a hill I'm going to die on.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. So similar to that, except ended up not winning me over in the end was Gift from Heaven, where the final chunk, say like the final fourth of it, it's this melancholy guitar lead comes in and it sounds fucking great. The whole final chunk is really, but it takes 3/4 of the song to get there, and I am just not into it.
100%. Yeah, like I've got a note that 4.5 minutes in is where it locks into a groove that I absolutely love. So yeah, it takes a while to get there.
Other stuff that I'm not completely sold on is Time, Death, and Wastefulness, which is like, it's nothing offensive there. It just kind of overstays its welcome for me. It's got an interesting dissonant kind of verse, but otherwise it's kind of big and sleazy.
Yeah, the other standout for me is Amoral, which I really like. I love the churn and the squeal of that one. And also I feel like the bass is particularly gut squeezing on that one. But to be honest with you, I think now at this stage, the point where I was going to give this personal favorite was probably when I was still in my, I'm going to get to be a contrarian and piss people off. Once I really thought about it properly, I was like, no, it's got stuff that I really like, but as a whole, it's a bit flawed. Indeed.
I do quite like though Angel Domain. I think because we haven't talked too much about their dabbling of melodic and softer stuff. It's not frequent, but it does happen every now and then. And even when it's softer and melodic, there's still some heaviness and some dirtiness there. But this one, with his sung vocals there, it's basically goth. It's really melodic. It's really nice. It still comes in and it still kicks a lot of ass, but I think it's got some great writing on that one.
Yep, I agree.
If Selfless was the groove metal album, this is like the 90s new metal one in many ways. I do think they get a little bit more new metal-y later on, which I actually like. But there's a little bit more hip hop beats on this one than the previous one. They feel a little extra goofy for some reason. I don't know why they feel extra goofy here as opposed to before, but I would say overall it's long, it's kind of scattered, it's inconsistent. Yeah, it's like it's one of my lesser favorites for sure.
Yeah, I think there's there's something fundamentally about the hip hop elements that I actually really like, and I do like what Brian Mantia is adding to the band for this record. So it's like I have certain warm, positive feelings to it, but in the cold light of day, when I have to listen to it from start to finish, I do kind of get tired of it as a whole, even though there are parts of it that I'm just like, ooh, like this really does like push some buttons for me.
Yeah, that's definitely a drawback for long albums in general, where if you don't nail the entire thing from beginning to end, it becomes very hard to justify going back to the whole album. Even some Godflesh albums are like that, I feel. But
one incidental thing to say though, another standout album cover.
Oh yeah. They do pretty well with album covers. I do like most of their album covers quite a bit.
Yeah, I didn't mention, but Pure is also a great album cover with the hand just in the dust and the dirt.
Oh yeah,
on the cover
that's
of it.
very creative. I love the Slavestate cover quite a bit actually. That one just makes me feel odd, and I don't know what exactly it is, but I think it's a fantastic cover.
Yeah, that is pretty cool too. The Songs of Love and Hate one, apparently, it's a kind of a famous grave site I think it's in Louisiana.
Oh,
it's like it's an area which is known for being heavily polluted because of a large amount of factories. I was reading a bit about it, but now I can't remember. But anyway, if people don't know about it, I'm sure they can look up like origins of Godflesh Songs of Love and Hate cover, because there's a whole story behind that location.
It's a very striking cover. The flame in the background is a nice touch. I'm looking at the cover on Wiki, and I just, my eyes happen to glance over the entry for this album, and apparently it says here that Brain was approached by his cousin who was managing Mr. Bungle. Brain's cousin is Mr. Bungle's manager, which is already a weird overlap. But he was apparently intimidated by Justin and thought he was scary. But they bonded over their love. This could all be bullshit. It's fucking wiki. But they bonded over their common ground love of jungle music.
Well, I mean, I don't know, and I don't want to be condescending here or patronizing, but as an American, are you familiar with the dance music subgenre of jungle?
I have heard it. When I see the term jungle music, I laugh. I don't know why.
I don't think they mean like... I don't think they're talking about umbongo, which is maybe a reference you're not going to get because that was a drink that we had in the UK, but they drink it in the Congo, apparently. Anyway, so that's beyond a tangent. But no, I think when they say jungle music, they're not meaning tribal. They mean 1990s subgenre of various different dance subgenres.
I imagine you just said dance in 1990s. I'm sure I would fucking hate it. I'm sure it's like the definition of the stuff I don't like about 90s dance music.
Well, there's some of it in the next album, so I guess when we start talking about that, we'll find out if you like it or not.
Yeah. I suppose you're right. So let's move on then to 1999's Us and Them. What happened here?
I think I sort of jumped the gun in the previous reading of the history. So basically, Brian Mantia couldn't tour with the band in 1996, so they got Ted Parsons to do the tour. The Songs of Love and Hate in dub album got put out the next year, and then in 1997, 1998, a whole bunch of different side projects came out, like Techno Animal, which also has, I believe, Kevin Martin from God in it as well. Ben also had a side project, Vitriol. I'm a bit hazy about this, but my understanding is they decided to go back to doing a drum machine album. And then I believe what happened at a certain point is Justin Broadrick went down a gigantic post-production wormhole and just ended up going insane, mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing. And so
it's so easy to do.
The final album is a product of that, for better or for worse. I wonder how you feel about it.
Believe it or not, I like it more than Songs of Love and Hate. So this is the funny thing. It sets itself up to be the 90s techno house album, and then turns around and goes like almost indie sounding, like alt rock. I mean, those are some bold ass choices. This is some of the most the most left turn shit we're gonna get in the entire discography is this album. But I think the writing is actually pretty damn good, and the riffs overall just kept me in.
Nice. I'm glad you think so, because this is actually one of my more... It's tricky because, again, it falls into that category of where I wish it wasn't so long. If I could pick out, let's say, half a dozen tracks from this, I could make an EP that I absolutely love. I really like the first track, I, Me, Mine, and I really like Us and Them. Endgames is okay, but Witch Hunt I also love. So like that first 4 tracks is mostly great for me. I love the sound of it. I like the fact that they're mixing in these different drum and bass and possibly some jungle elements as well. And you can hear the amount of interesting different textures and production choices that are going on. And something as well that I think is quite interesting is that the guitar is there, but it's really like processed in a way that takes it away as a kind of like a riffing focal point. Like the textures themselves become more a driver of the track rather than like really distinctive guitar riffs, I would say, in a lot of cases on this album.
Interesting. Yeah, because it is very rhythmic. And talking about the jungle stuff, that shit is all over. And you just named the first 4 tracks. I'm on board completely. First 4 tracks, hell yes. As soon as whose truth is your truth comes in, that's when I'm starting to get a little worn out. And by Defiled, I am just fucking done with that beat. That fucking 90s house beat, I'm so over it at that point. But thankfully, after that is kind of when things start to turn more toward the weird indie alt side. It actually works pretty damn well. There's like great movement, even though it's quite sludgy and bittersweet. It's just a killer main riff. It's just super original.
I do appreciate the fact that, like, in terms of the shifts from one track to the next, it does have range and it does have dynamics. But like you, whose truth is your truth is where I start to lose interest. I mean, I get there's nothing that I hate on the rest of the album, but nothing really jumped out to excite me again. Defiled, it's okay. Bittersweet is quite I don't want to say it's formulaic, but it's very much of a type that I'm familiar with from Godflesh at this point, and I feel like they've done it better in other places. I have various comments about the rest of the album, but essentially, there's interesting stuff going on, interesting production choices. I actually thought it's kind of funny by the time it gets to Descent, I'm partly thinking to myself, it's almost like we're listening to a remix album, but it's like it's the original album. And I guess that just kind of feeds into what I was saying about him getting lost in mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing, because it sort of feels like he's taking tracks at a certain point and going like, I just need to keep working on it. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to hear what kind of like demo versions of some of these tracks sounded like.
Yeah, that Descent is a very interesting example because it's got some prominent hip hop beats with clean psychedelic vocals and really dark riffs. It's a stew of just 3 things that don't go together at all, and it ends up coming out super unique. It does feel very tinkered. It definitely feels tinkered. Songs that don't feel jammed out. They feel Frankenstein. They feel sort of sewn together more than they feel like just composed in a room with someone. It definitely has a lot of that, and especially with all like the crazy techno beats. It feels so much more collagey, even though they're still very much songs. I just think the fucking riffs are pretty damn cool. I like the internal, which is like, I mean, that's like a hopeful sounding indie riff.
It's very different, yeah. And I think actually, like, I was really tempted to message you at a certain point and tell you to listen to a specific Yezu track. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I decided you're going to have so much Godflesh to listen to already. I don't want to overwhelm you with that. But this, to me, is where you start to get hints of where they would go in Yezu. I like the slow guitar arpeggio, and that is kind of getting more into the sort of sonic realms of Yezu. And essentially, like, yeah, I like this, but because I've listened to a fair amount of Yezu, when I hear this, I go like, oh, cool. This is like stuff that would be more fully realized with Yezu. So I appreciate it for what it is. I think it's a cool direction to go within the album, but I think he would end up like realizing that kind of style better later on in that other project.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because you're saying that he was saying earlier on that this is not a band for experimentation, that he doesn't remember these albums fondly for that. But this is experimentation, and I think it does mostly land. I don't have the Yezu context as much, but coming in with this, it does sound a little overproduced and overthought in spots. But honestly, who cares? When you got some good ass riffs, I don't really care that much. When you get Live to Lose, it's still as dirty and sludgy as ever, but it's still got some grunginess to it and some indiness to it. And yeah, I mean, it's just still original. And the fact that it's still this original is kind of, even though it's like the weird spot of the discography, it kept me invested. The fact that it's so different. And if it was maybe like his original vision or current vision of Godflesh is Godflesh, it's going to stay Godflesh, I probably would have gotten more fatigued with the discography. So I'm glad these albums are there.
And I totally agree with that as well. It's kind of an interesting aspect to it that I think the experimentation's kind of necessary, I think, for him to figure out. And I don't want to exclude the bass player, but I kind of think of Justin as sort of being the driving force. Maybe that's not fair, but I feel like they sort of needed to have this experimentation period to go away and then go, right, what is it that we actually want from Godflesh? And then come back maybe with a clearer vision of it. And as you say, I think if they just stuck to a template, it would have got really fatiguing. So I think ultimately for the health of the whole catalog, and just because there's stuff here I really like anyway, I think it's good that they did have some diversions and tried different things out.
Going into this next EP, which was not released in 2000, the Messiah EP, it was recorded in 1994, so it's going a little bit backwards, but it was released in 2000. What happened here? Why was this delayed so much?
It's a good question. I don't actually know why it got delayed so much, but I particularly wanted to include this one because I thought that it would be interesting for you to hear as a bridge between the Selfless album and Songs of Love and Hate. Because for me, this is where I start to hear more of the hip-hop elements. But it's interesting that they're doing that with drum machines, and I actually think really successfully. I really wanted for a long time to give this personal favorite, but ultimately I couldn't because I think the first track, the title track, is just a bit like, it's okay. But I think after that, the next three tracks, particularly track 2 and 3, are amazing. Like some of my favorite Godflesh music.
I agree. This is easily one of my favorites. This is one of my 3 or 4 favorite records from them. This, and hearing it, no one, because I didn't realize it was recorded in 94 until right before we started filming. It makes way more sense now because the moments of like the 90s house beat or the jungle beat, whatever the hell, and the hip hop stuff, it feels so much more subtle. It feels a lot more ingrained with the crunchy, sludgy stuff than the albums that would follow after. So it's the perfect amount of everything for me. The blending of those two weird styles, really, really dichotomous styles, it just suits me so much more. It's a wonderful little porridge there. It's succinct, of course. This short EP, 22 minutes, not counting all the bonus tracks, which we skipped for sure. It's all the grooviness that was they were dabbling with. I think just nailed. They finally nailed it on this EP. I think even the title track Messiah, I still like it a lot. It's a little bit closer to grunge than it is sludge, I feel like. But even with that, with an EP like this, I always love a good ramp in quality. Like I have the patience for albums and EPs. That's just when my brain works. If I'm sitting down to listen to it, I don't need the opener to be the best song on the album. Oftentimes I've been burned by that too many times. So I like it when it's a ramp up and like track 2 is like, oh, hold on a second. And then track 3 gets better. I like that. So this ended up being like not counting Streetcleaner, this is like my second favorite record of theirs. This is, or like third favorite. Yeah. I mean, it's great. I think it's wonderful.
Just to check, have we only had your best so far?
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Interesting.
I like this band.
Yeah. That's really cool. So yeah, I agree really with everything you're saying about this. I had a similar thing in terms of the title tracks. I do still like it, and actually in a way I appreciate the fact that if I'm in the mood for the title track, then the whole experience is going to be ace, because it's just like I'm already enjoying it, and then I'm just like, oh shit, that's right, after this track everything gets better. So it's kind of like it's good enough to get my interest, and then it's a doorway into it just getting better and better. So yeah, I really like the sound of this. I think it's mixed in a way that I really like. The bass is prominent enough. I like what he's doing with his vocals. It's kind of cool. Like in a way, maybe there's a certain like the pressure's off when they're doing the EPs. They can just kind of try something out that they might not be as confident to do on an album. And on this one, I would say it definitely lands. So it's kind of funny that this was a release that almost didn't see the light of day for a while, and it ends up being one of the favorites of both of ours.
Oh yeah. One of their best records, really. I mean, this is just excellent stuff, and pretty cool ass cover too. You know, since we're now talking about the covers, I love the formatting of it. I love a good boxed format of an album cover.
Are you now? Which I think there are two different covers.
There are two. I'm talking about the official release with the white,
not the one with like the Turin shroud or whatever that one is. The one that's got Godflesh at the top and Messiah at the bottom.
Yeah. That is a cool cover. I like that. Moving on to the last album before they broke up the first time, 2001's Hymns. What happened here? Were things turbulent with the band? What happened here?
The band split from Earache, apparently.
Oh.
And they signed to Music for Nations and Koch in the US. and the label debut came out in 2001 with Hymns. Ben Green left shortly after. This was the beginning of the end for the band. After performing several European tour dates, a full US tour was announced, but was never to occur. Just as Justin was to embark on his journey to the States, he announced that Godflesh had disbanded. I know a few little extra things about this. I believe, I hope I'm not talking out of school by saying this, but Justin had like more or less a nervous breakdown at this point, and they were supposed to go on tour. And apparently they'd already committed to various dates, and he just like basically locked himself in his house and wouldn't answer the phone. And so ended up owing a lot of money. And then I guess had to pay it back. So there was a whole fallout from all of this. And I have mixed things to say about this, but worst.
Personal favorite. I love this album. I think it's crazy. Shit. I think you to give this worse. My brain is short circuiting right now because I love this album. So, okay. And in all fairness, it is the new metal album.
So here's the thing. This is going to be a really interesting conversation talking about this album. I love elements of this record. It's got one of my all-time favorite Godflesh songs on it. And I think there is an argument for saying, like, in some way, this is like one of their best sounding records. But I will give my arguments for why I think ultimately it's objectively their worst album. But please rhapsodize away about why you love this record first.
For one, the bass tone is unbelievable. The best sounding bass I think I've ever heard. It's just, it captures everything that you want about a punishing, powerful, heavy bass sound. It's got the perfect amount of picking and punchy action with the full fat heaviness. I listened to this album like I think 3 times for this preparation. And every time I hit play on Defeated, it comes in like, all right, it's a Godflesh album, hell yeah. And then as soon as it kicks in, I without control of my own body, I run to the volume and I crank it every single time without even realizing. It's just, it needs to be blasted. It feels so incredibly good. There are some riffs here that are just ingenious. The main riff to Paralyzed, holy shit. Holy shit, is that one of the coolest riffs I've ever heard. It's a super duper heavy, of course, but it's got this subtle little melody. Is it very nu metal sounding? Sure, but nu metal isn't all bad. There's a lot of moments where like the bass has a lot of floppiness to it because it's so heavy. Again, I'm fine with that. There's a lot of grooviness that it does remind me of nu metal. Again, I'm completely fine with it because I think the riffs hit super hard. The moments of melody on here, I think, land incredibly well. Like Yesu, the closer, probably my favorite closer of theirs because it's 2 tracks in one. The first track is Brutality, of course, and it's very cool. And then there's a secret track. I don't even think it has a name. I wasn't able to find a name for the secret track. Oh
yeah, no, it just comes at the end of Yesu.
Yeah, and it's a clean sung vocals. It builds up and it gets very emotionally resonant and loud, but it's one of the most beautiful songs, just beautiful riffs. It's just so well done and executed, and it feels amazing as a closer. I love every song. I can't even fathom how this could be worse especially when knowing what other albums are there, and I've heard them too. I love it. I love it.
This is fascinating. I'm in a way I'm delighted that you've given this personal favorite, because there was a certain point in listening to all this stuff for this episode where I was thinking to myself, if I picked the right tracks, this could be my personal favorite. But ultimately, the more I listened to it, the more the flaws that I see in it stood out to me. So, like you, when I stick on the album and I listen to the beginning of Defeat, it's just like, oh, this is just so satisfying. Like, I love the production. I love like how meaty the basses and the drums, like it just is so satisfying in the tone. But the more I've listened to this record, and this is kind of funny because this might be one of these things, it's like kind of the Mike blind spot. It's got some of, or I would maybe say it has got the clunkiest lyrics from Justin Broadrick.
Oh, yeah, definitely a blind spot for sure for me.
I think it's in Defeated where he's like, do you know what? I have to look it up. because it's a bit unfair to like read out lyrics separately from songs because they're supposed to be. It's like this is a bit of a tangent, but if you read Tool lyrics, independent of actually listening to Tool,
Rough.
That's some rough shit there.
I'm not even a little bit surprised. I don't care how many people hate me for that. I mean, I don't care.
Yeah. Okay. So, Defeated. Everything I build, I destroy. Everything I love always hurts. Everything I hate, I'd rather love. Everything I am is everything I'm not.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, let's just say literal.
It's clunky to me because the thing is, if I look through the catalog of Godflesh, it's like the lyrics are not sort of a standout element, but the lyrics don't ever like negatively stand out to me. This is the first album or the first release where it's like they're kind of jarring to me. It's like it spoils my enjoyment of how much I love the sound of that song. And then, okay, so in terms of like what I love most about this album, Anthem. Again, by the way, Leonard Cohen song, not a cover, just the the title. Also, incidentally, for anyone that hasn't seen it, go onto YouTube, type in Godflesh Anthem Jesus Christ Superstar. You get to watch a scene from Jesus Christ Superstar, which is perfectly in sync with this song, and you get to see all these people dancing to Anthem by Godflesh.
It's fun.
Fucking amazing. I love that track. That is, I would say, of every single track in the Godflesh catalog, that is the one that comes closest to bringing me to tears. Like that song just really gets me emotionally. I love the fact that he's going for the sort of like soaring, wailing vocals for that. And that combined with the overall sound and the production for me is amazing. I fucking love that track so much. But even like going beyond Defeated, which I still love, even though I find the lyrics clunky, Deaf, Dumb and Blind and Paralyzed, when I was still thinking like, oh, this could maybe be my personal favorite, I was thinking, yeah, all these first 4 tracks I love. But the more I listen to this album, the more I sort of feel a bit uneasy. Like, oh, some of this stuff is a bit like just kind of going over the same stuff. Like it feels a little bit to me self-conscious. Like he's kind of going, right, we did the sort of hip hop thing with a drummer, not totally satisfied with that. I then went down a wormhole overproducing stuff. I'm not satisfied with that. Right, fuck, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. Let's try this out. And just not being 100% convinced in what he's doing. I actually, after Anthem, like until the last track, I'm just like, ugh, it doesn't really, it just doesn't do much for me. Yeah.
It is for sure definitely not as diverse. It's definitely doing more of the one thing. I do kind of see how if you're not immediately sold by some of these riffs, the presentation is so samey enough to blend in and be like, all right, it's just another Godflesh album. Riffs happen to just get me. And there weren't too many like really novel moments. Like one of the few novel moments is on For Life. There's an aspect of Godflesh vocals that we didn't even mention yet that I can't believe we haven't mentioned because it's been since the very beginning. The mutated growls. That's the only way I can describe them. Where it's like he's like layering. It sounds like he has like he's doing some kind of effect on them. I don't think he's double tracking them, but it sounds like
you like there's stuff like that on Us and Them.
There's stuff like that since the very beginning. So even on Streetcleaner, there's stuff like that where it sounds, it's almost like there's an octave higher growling with him. It sounds like he's mutating it. That's the way I describe it. So the mutated vocals on For Life remind me a lot of the robot vocals on War Dance from Killing Joke. You know what I'm talking about?
Which is a classic Killing Joke song that I don't like.
Really? All right.
Never liked War Dance.
I love me some War Dance. But yeah, so that's like there's very few moments where I think, oh, that's a novel, interesting vocal thing or a production thing or whatever. It is very straightforward, and the presentation, I keep saying new metal, it does feel like a much cooler, a much heavier, much more brutal new metal album in like the rhythm choices, mostly in the rhythm choices. That's kind of what it revolves around. But I love early Korn, so I'm not going to complain about that.
I don't mind early Korn either. It's fascinating for me. I wonder if I'm going to come back to this weeks or months down the line and completely change my opinion about this. But I've known this album for years, so I'm not sure if I can sort of go back to loving the stuff that I've sort of started to pick holes in. But like I say, I think Anthem is incredible, and there are other things in the first few tracks that I really love. And I think the sound overall is amazing. The main thing for me is that I get tired of it. And there are riffs on here that I kind of feel like, it sort of feels like they're going through the motions, even though that could be my imagination. And maybe it's influenced by the fact that I know that they disbanded the band after this. So it's kind of got that overall sense and presence of just like, something was unsatisfying for them.
Something was given out. They were getting tired with something. Yeah, I found the songwriting to be super notable here, even though I was just more struck with the songwriting than I was expecting, especially compared to the last few albums last many albums where production stands out so much with a band like this, that when I hear writing that's kind of diverse, because this album, it does jump around with the moods, and I think that's what kind of kept me invested a lot, because you get stuff like Regal, which is really uplifting, and it's just unusual.
Reminds me of Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh shit. Interesting. I haven't listened to them in a long time.
Obviously not the vocals, but
thank Christ.
I wonder if anyone else has that feeling with Regal. But I am genuinely happy that this is your personal favorite, because there are elements that I love. But the last time I listened to this album, I was trying to think, like, to sum up how I felt about it. And what I came up with was listening to this album is like having a beer that's delicious at first, but by the end, I wish I'd never opened the bottle.
You know, I'm brand new with this, and I've only heard this album 3 times, so maybe I'll feel like that later. But for now, that's a good ass beer.
I don't want to spoil it in any way for you. And this is not me trying to go like, I've known this album for longer, so therefore I know better. It's just curious for me. Like, there are aspects that I love, but in total, I came to the conclusion that I thought that this was the worst. So I'm intrigued that your worst is going to be something else.
Oh, indeed. So moving on to the next reunion EP.
Yeah, so I don't think I've got notes in here, but one thing I wanted to say in between them. So, given that Justin does have so many different projects, I think throughout all the time that he's in Godflesh or Yazoo or Godflesh, he's got a whole bunch of other stuff he's doing. But I think it's fair to say that when Godflesh is and was around, Godflesh was the main project. And in the period where Godflesh stopped, Yazoo became the main project. I haven't listened to all the Yazoo stuff. I've seen them live. I saw them live, and then I got to see Godflesh after they reformed. And what I wanted to get you to listen to, but I would suggest that at some point after this episode you listen to it, check out the track Heartache by Yazoo. Mm-hmm. It's a 2-track EP, Heartache and another track. For me, Heartache is like, it encapsulates everything that's amazing about Yazoo. There's a heaviness that you can recognize from Godflesh, but it expands out into more like overtly post-rock or shoegaze, and he mixes these elements, kind of like angelic in some respects. It goes for like about 23 minutes. I found with later Godflesh stuff, kind of like what I was saying about that track on Us and Them, there were later Godflesh tracks where I was like, oh, cool, they're doing some of the Yazoo stuff here, but it's not quite as good as Heartache.
Right.
So
not as developed.
That's my condensed 13-year history of the break between Godflesh and Godflesh is check out Heartache. It's amazing.
Well, hell yeah, we'll do. So 2014 comes, and they reunite and they put out the Decline and Fall EP. How did they get back together? Why? I imagine he had some nice time to miss the band.
I've got an interview here with The Quietist from 2014, and they ask why release the EP Decline and Fall before the album. And Broadrick says, that was a classic Godflesh move. In our history, we often released EPs before albums. I have a love for the format. EPs are essentially non-committal, somewhat experimental, and were a format dear to me as a kid, which I guess kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Singles I was never that enamored with because I felt like you had to spend too much to get very little, but 4-track EPs I just adored. Some of the first EPs I bought were early Killing Joke. They had dub versions, which has influenced my entire career. Birmingham was very multicultural, and my parents were really into music. And sometimes at night, I'd be sitting in cars with them. They'd be smoking dope and have the local radio on reggae. So when I got into post-punk, the fact that Killing Joke had some relationship with that culture fascinated me. EPs with dub versions have stuck with me ever since.
And we've covered none of them on this supposed thorough episode of the band's discography.
So I don't have it in the notes here, but I think what happened initially is that they reformed to play some live shows. It may have in fact been for the 2011 performance at Roadburn where they played Streetcleaner in its entirety. And I think initially, at least from quotes I can remember, they weren't, or at least Justin says, we weren't necessarily going to record new material. But then after they'd played a bit, they decided, hey, do you know what, actually, let's do it. And I think him and Ben, from what I understand, hadn't fallen out at any point, but they'd just sort of been going off and doing separate things. And Justin wasn't sure if he'd want to come back and do Godflesh, because without having Ben, there'd be no possibility of doing Godflesh.
Right.
And so from what I remember reading, he was kind of like, would you be interested in doing some Godflesh? And Ben's like, yeah, fucking right. And then off they went again.
Off they went with this EP, which I think is a good EP, but nothing out of the ordinary for them at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, so this was sort of the point where I started thinking about this notion from Justin that there's sort of like a pure Godflesh sound, and he'd strayed away from it and he wanted to get back to it. Because I think listening to this EP, you can sort of hear that intent to go like, right, let's have something that's grimy and heavy and abrasive. And it's like sort of what you would think of with like classic Godflesh. So I think, it does do that pretty well. I'm glad that they cut it from the album rather than having the two of them together. Because I think if you'd had the album and the EP together, I definitely would have fatigued.
Yeah.
But I do like the production of it. To give a sense of Yezu, so the second track, Dog Bite, I would describe it as like a texture that's kind of like a furnace.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very Yezu type of thing. So to me, that's where I go like, okay, I can hear what he's bringing in texture. I mean, I think in general, that's one thing. If I was to sort of talk about all this post-reforming stuff in general, I feel like there are extra textures they've added which weren't there in the early Godflesh stuff. So it's kind of like tonally richer, I would say.
There's definitely some stuff there. I didn't catch as many. Like it's not nearly as many as like the mid period where there was actual experimentation, but there's subtle little differences where it's not a carbon copy of the early days, but it is closer to the early days than they've ever been since the early days.
Yeah, I think they never at this point, they don't ever go back to what they sounded like at the beginning, because there was a certain kind of simplicity there, which is now gone forever. But I think in a way they're kind of going back to simplicity of rhythm, but with more complex textures.
I would say that's exactly it. It's the primitiveness of the early stuff, but with a tad more complexity in songwriting. It's a cool EP. I would say I would say that the writing isn't quite as strong as it's ever been. I don't feel super drawn to come back here. I'm not going to be mad if you put it on. I like the EP. In terms of EPs, I'm going to other ones first for Godflesh.
Yeah, I agree. For me, this is like it's good. It's solid. I like it. I think having that as a comeback is totally respectable. It doesn't really have anything that massively stands out, but it also doesn't have any sore thumbs on it. Exactly.
And that leads immediately into A World Lit Only by Fire, also from 2014. So, I mean, like, it seemed like they were all written the exact same time period. They just put the EP out first.
So interestingly enough, I've got a little quote from Justin where he says the whole idea for the album was to make a very singular, very brutal, almost monosyllabic record. I didn't want it to be dynamic or remotely progressive, because even though those are often seen as positive things, they're not for me. I like it to be as primitive and primal as possible. How successful do you think he was in that aim? And do you think that was a good aim to have?
I think it's a good album. Well, let's see, because I like this album not as much. Of course, obviously not as much as hymns, because I love hymns, but it's so incredibly heavy. The heaviness here it's some of the heavy stuff ever written. This is about as heavy as it gets. The songwriting doesn't land for me quite as much, but I still like the whole thing. There's only like 2 tracks that I don't care for. And even then I don't hate them. Even then there's still some really great, like the opener, New Dark Ages, is damn good. I mean, it is damn good. There's some stuff on here that is damn good. Oh, yeah.
And also as well, I like how the textures build in the opening track.
Yeah. Around 3:15, this sinister ass riff comes in. Feels incredible. And then it also doesn't shy away from the big, fat, ugly, abrasive, dissonant stuff like on Obeyed, which is, it's just so, it's so ugly, but it's one of the best songs in the album.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like, it's a grim trudge, but it is effective. And that's something that, I guess it's like a similar thing you have with Swans. They like to trudge, and sometimes those can be, endearing is the wrong word, but sometimes like it just feels really good, and other times it's off-putting. And I think in this case, it works to have that.
Yeah. I think overall, the what ended up making me not love this album is the length. At this point in the discography, listening to all these albums and trying to be familiar with as many of, trying to be as familiar with them as possible. I mean, this is shorter for them. It's like 53 minutes, still a long album, but the lack of stylistic diversity, that works when I hear diversity in writing, but this has neither. Pretty much. There's very little light on here. It's pretty much pure agony and punishing brutality, which that if you put that on an EP, fuck yeah, it's an amazing EP. You put it on an album, I need something. If you're not going to change it arrangement wise or presentation wise, then change it writing wise. This is one mode the whole way through for sure.
No, I think that is a very fair point, because on the one hand, I can see when I look at the post-reforming Godflesh output, I can sort of see that sense of, right, let's sort of get back to what we think is the core of Godflesh, and they sort of fulfill that. But on the other hand, if you go back to the first EP and you go back to Streetcleaner, they've got this primitive sound in a way, but they still manage to make it diverse, and maybe they haven't quite captured that at this point. They've managed to come back having learned a whole bunch about production, and so they've managed to make a really cool sound a lot of the times, but the sort of particularly standout songwriting isn't always necessarily there.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Exactly that. Well, I mean, this sort of set up like a lot of momentum for them. They just kept going right after this.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to mention, I've got an interview here with The Quietus. I think this might be what I referred to back before. And it's actually quite an interesting feature where it's Justin, I think this was a whole series that they had. Justin Broadrick talks about his favorite albums.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I picked out was he singled out Fire Dancers by Killing Joke as being his favorite album, which I think you said you also, and possibly for me as well. It's one of my absolute favorites. And the funny thing is that he says here, okay, so there's a little bit more, and this is also quite funny because he's talking about his parents again and about the dope smoking. So what he says about the album, he says, the first time I heard Killing Joke was on John Peel in my bedroom with a little transistor radio held up to my ear. When my mom and stepdad sent me to bed so they could smoke dope, I'd go upstairs, clearly high at 11 years old, and play John Peel from 10 to midnight. Poor guy.
Oh, geez.
My mom wondered, why is it so hard for him to get up for school? And it was like, because you're smoking dope all night and I'm breathing it in and I'm inspired to listen to fucking John Peel and all this odd abstract music.
Jesus Christ, that's so shitty.
Yeah. So he says that he bought it in 83 and he was obsessed with it ever since. He somewhere says that basically this is the album that he was listening to the most when he was recording or writing A World Lit Only by Fire, which is funny to me because I don't hear that album at all on this record.
At all.
But I do hear it on Something Later.
Okay.
I hear it a lot on Something Later.
Interesting. So let's move on then to the follow-up, 2017's Post Self. What's going on here? Is it just riding the wave of the reunion at this point?
Yeah, like I remember when this came out and I remember listening to it. I think I was living in Prague at the time. But yeah, when I saw them live, I guess it must have been, I think I maybe saw them live before the album even came out, because I saw them in the same week that I saw Swans after Swans reformed. So maybe I saw Godflesh like a couple of years before they recorded A World Lit Only by Fire. But yeah, I remember that album coming out. This one followed 2 or 3 years later. So yeah, I don't really have much history, but I guess they were sort of touring. There's only 2 albums left. So do you have anything particular to say?
I have something particular to say. I love this album. I like this one a lot. I was That's partly one of the reasons why I wasn't so big on the previous one. It's because it's sandwiched in between two albums that I really like. So this one caught me off guard because they're back experimenting. It's a very subtle experimentation, but it's still not just sticking to the one brutal. It feels like they did what they wanted to do with the last one, which is return to the roots. But and by the time this one comes around, they're like, okay, we could loosen the reins a little bit. We can experiment a little bit. So it's not going crazy with it. There's not a bunch of techno beats on there, but there is a lot of synths on here. It's one of their heaviest synth albums, like a lot of slasher synths. And it's also one of the most chaotically brutal. There's so much heaviness on here that you lose the riff completely. The riff sounds like or it feels like a cloud of smoke. It's that like almost clipping. That's how heavy it is. You can't even tell what the hell is happening.
That's very interesting that you say that, because my thinking about this album is that it's possibly their most texturally rich album. And I actually think it's a weird thing to imagine for a Godflesh record, but if you took the drums out of a Godflesh record, I think this might be the album that would survive the best without having drums, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because kind of like what you're saying with like the chaos and the heaviness, not necessarily being with the riffs. Like I think particularly once you get to Be God, that's where it particularly gets more into the atmosphere and the textures. The first few tracks have got more in the way, I think, of like clear riffing, and it just sort of gets more and more experimental. Like that's where I really start to get into the album. I like the first 4 tracks well enough, but Be God, The Cyclic End, and Pre-Self I fucking love. And then I'm in such a good mood for the rest of the album as it sort of like branches off into these weird sort of soundscapes at times with a lot of references to Geordie's guitar I find throughout this album. So many tracks where I'm just like, it's that like if you think of particularly Fire Dancers, like that's why I'm surprised that he talks about it for the previous album, because I hear Fire Dancers all over this record.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. There's a lot more texture in this album for sure, even if it's completely impossible to decipher, like on Be God, because that's one of the ones where even the vocals are super buried and distorted, or on Nobody, where it feels like everything is clipping, like it's just so much.
I was going to say exactly. I like that effect that it's as though the bass is too loud and it's clipping. Mm-hmm. I think it's really cool, and they just do it for that one track.
It's a very interesting song also because it's one of the most sludgy songs that feels incredibly electronic without ever crossing over into an electronic song. It's like this perfect little balance between the two. It feels extremely electronic, but your brain doesn't categorize it as an electronic song.
Yeah, like on Mortality Sorrow, that arpeggio, it's funny, at the beginning it makes me think of Tomahawk. I don't know if it's the first album or the second album. There's something about that melody that reminds me of Tomahawk. And then I realized what it reminds me of even more. It's of Power to Believe era King Crimson. There's something in the guitar. I don't know if you remember. I think that was a period of King Crimson you didn't like. That was
which year was that?
97 or maybe 2001 it might be, or maybe even like later. Right. It was quite late. Yeah, it was one of the. It might even have been the last album. Actually,
the last album is the one that I didn't care for, but everything before that was actually quite pretty good.
There's something in that guitar sound and also in the melody that made me think of that. I like the experimentation. I like the textures. It's interesting because in a way, with everything we've been saying about whether they're experimenting or whether they're sort of like keeping things straight, it's like this has kind of got both. It's sort of like a straightforward Godflesh record in a sense, but because of all of the stuff they're doing texturally, it actually gives you quite a lot more to keep your interest and not just the rhythms. Like, yeah, it's a very textural album.
Yeah, I found it to be a nice middle ground, a nice compromise of what they're trying to do, to the point where, yeah, it just has great pacing. Also, it's one of the shorter albums. It's like 40 minutes, 46 minutes, which is, yeah, for a Godflesh album, that is very short. So it feels more succinct. It has more steady flow to it. It doesn't feel like everything is very even. There's nothing that kind of sticks out as like, oh, there's that one song that kind of plods. Even though some parts can be very difficult and some parts can be very overwhelming, it moves quick enough and it never lingers too long. So The diversity here kept me on board. I think it's great. I love it.
One other little thing to mention, which I discovered purely by accident. So at one point I was listening to this while I was running, and I was listening to the Bandcamp version, and I'd forgotten that there are bonus tracks, but actually, if you haven't bought it, it skips the first two title tracks and then just plays the last one, In Your Shadow, J.K. Flesh Reshape. I like that track more than every other track on this album. In fact, I like that track more than a lot of... It's one of my favorite things I've heard Justin do.
Holy crap.
So I'd say for anyone that hasn't heard it, go to Bandcamp, and if you don't already have the album, check out the very last track, track 13, In Your Shadow, the remix. I think it's really, really cool. And listening to that track, because at the time I was listening to it, I thought like, oh, this is just the album. And I was like, holy shit, like, this is really interesting in terms of the production. I think I was able to believe that because of all of the textural stuff that's going on in this record. But that one is particularly, I don't want to say it's dancey, but it's like, it's very kind of, I don't even know what it reminds of. It's like, it's quite ambient, but it's still like got enough of a pulse to it that it's not just floaty. But it made me think to myself, like, oh, how cool would it be if Justin Broadrick collaborated with like a superstar DJ, someone who's just like really, really like amazing producer. It would be interesting to see what could come of him taking his music with somebody that's like a producer. Maybe that wouldn't work in terms of like, you know, creative vision or whatever, but it just made me think like, it would be cool if someone came along, like, this is where I have to try and think of DJs. I don't know, like, let's say if the Chemical Brothers or Sasha or, I don't know, someone came along and said, fuck it, let's fuck around with some Godflesh songs.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't already.
Think about that.
The influence of Godflesh. I mean, why? It seems like a missed opportunity.
Maybe they have, and I just don't know about it, because within the gigantic swirling cauldron that is Justin Broadrick's music, there could be all kinds of stuff I'm not actually aware of. But anyway,
impossible to keep track of all of it. But that leads to the most recent album, but not, as far as I know, not the last album. I mean, there's supposed to be another album coming out this year, I think, which was ill-timed for this episode, but that's just the way it happened. Yeah, this brings us to 2023's Purge. And I mean, there's only one thing that could be left, and that is worst least favorite for me. And it's...
I'd forgotten that we didn't have least favorite either. Wow, worst and least favorite.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
It was really between this and Songs 11 Hate. And going back to Songs 11 Hate, there's just too much on that album that I think is great. This one is the only one where I was actually bored for a lot of it. And following the last album, it felt a little bit more disappointing because of how interesting that one was. This one also has one of the few Godflesh moments in the entire discography where, thinking back to it, I am really off-put by the song The Father. I was listening to many of these albums with my lovely lady, and she's a trooper. Godflesh isn't her thing, but she was like, yeah, she's heard so much crazy shit with me at this point that she's like, yeah, and it's just heavy music, it's cool. And she likes some of it for sure. The Father was the one song where she's like, I think I'm over the song, and I was like, yeah, all right, I'm over it too. Yep. That's like the only one.
You may not be aware of the history here, but this album was conceptually created to be like kind of a spiritual follow-up to Pure.
Oh, interesting.
The funny thing is, when I listened to, like, when this came out, I actually reviewed it, and I haven't been back to look at what my review said. But I think when I listened to it at the time, I think I felt more positively about it than I do now, perhaps because I was listening to it with like space around me, having not pummeled myself with Godflesh.
Yeah.
I think having gone through everything else and been re-listening to everything, compared to everything else, I'm like, this is okay. Like, I don't really object to anything. I do like the overall sound. I think it's very dirty and very nasty sounding. Like, it's one of the most kind of overdriven records, I think, in sound. And I think the first track, Nero, does come in pretty effectively. But after that, what I tend to hear in a few tracks is Crush My Soul. That do 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 do. Like Landlord makes me think of Crush My Soul. Permission makes me think of Crush My Soul as well. So I'm not really quite sure what the callback to Pure is, because it doesn't really remind me of Pure in particular. The only track on here that is like a real standout for me, I would say, is probably Mythology of Self, which again reminds me of Swans. I would say like one of the heaviest tracks, one of the heaviest Godflesh tracks.
Oh yeah.
And that was a standout for me. Everything else I was all right with. I guess going back to my previous comment, because I think the production is cool. Like, that carries it. But yeah, in terms of the songwriting, it doesn't have so much kind of standout material for me. And maybe in a way as well, like the fact that it does have quite an overdriven sound can also make it a bit more sort of fatiguing as an overall listening experience.
Fatiguing, even though it is also another one of their shorter albums, there's the lack of diversity one, yeah, for sure. But I think they've done pretty much everything on this album before, but better. Like everything, including you cited both Landlord and Permission. Both of those have, you know, the drum, you know, 90s house techno beat on those, and so they're bringing that kind of stuff back. But even then, it's not nearly as interesting as it was before. I like stuff on here. There's stuff on here that's definitely cool. It's just I'm cool with it, rather than I'm like, fuck yes. I was very fuck yes about the album before this one. I felt it to be a little bit, not dim, but it felt muted in its execution compared to even what is it called, A World Only by Fire. Like, if everything feels like it feels a lot more tired. It feels more muted. It feels more samey. It feels less diverse, and it feels like they're finally. Outsiders will probably think this many of their albums, but I think finally at this point in their career, their very last album up to this point, they're finally repeating themselves, like actually repeating themselves.
Yeah, and which is kind of weird when critiquing this album, because that seems to have sort of been the intention, like it's supposed to be a callback. But as a listener, it's not necessarily kind of clear what that is supposed to fulfill. Overall, I'm just really, really happy that you had such a positive experience with Godflesh.
Oh yeah. I'm really glad that we took our time with this one too, because if I were to try to cram this in a week or two, I probably would have came up with a lot more sameness and fatigue. But yeah, this is a juggernaut. It is a brutal band, and they scratch a lot of itches.
That was also part of the reason why I wanted to put the EPs in, because I thought that you might fatigue with the albums, and having the EPs in would be like a bit of a palate cleanser between them. Yeah,
and some of those EPs, of course, and some of their best stuff ever. So I would say absolutely worth checking out. So yeah, this album comes out 2023. What's the deal now? What happened 8 weeks ago?
This post was accompanied with a picture of Justin in hospital. So anyway, this is what Justin posted 8 weeks ago on Instagram. I've dreaded sharing this news partly due to the threat of insensitive and or negative comments combined simply with the general anxiety of it all. And I am also exhausted, but I've left comments on. Also as well, something I didn't mention, but just for like sort of, I don't know, a bit of color and context. Couple of years ago, Justin revealed that he's autistic.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know, you know, maybe something to think about in terms of the story of like, maybe at the point of hymns where things all got on top of him. Like, I don't know how much that was sort of like being psychologically overwhelmed by various different pressure, how much that might be related to the autism. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
The mixing of
us and them.
Of us and
of going down the wormhole. Also,
wormhole makes a lot of sense. Makes more sense now. Although that, you know, to be fair, that has happened to me, and I'm not autistic, despite what some commenters might say. It does happen. It definitely does happen.
Yeah. So he goes on. So 3 weeks ago, I had significant open abdominal surgery for an inguinal hernia that was close to an emergency. Oof. I am still in shock from the process, and as someone with diagnosed autism and CPTSD, open surgery is absolutely debilitating, not that it is easier for anyone, of course. I had a huge hernia, and for it to be repaired, I had to endure a 6-inch incision in my groin. This, unfortunately, was not keyhole surgery. I have a very weak abdominal wall, which at being 57 years old this year is not going to improve. If I continue to perform and shout, scream as I do with Godflesh, then I am at high risk for more hernias and blowing out my abdominal wall entirely. Godflesh Live ended the day of my surgery, and upon the surgeon making this statement. I am now just about walking freely, but with little pace, albeit extremely carefully. The full healing process is approximately 6 months. Fortunately, my other projects do not require screaming, shouting, nor a physically demanding performance. Yezu and JK Flesh shows remain. And I don't know JK Flesh well, but like I said with the post-self song, I loved that. So I definitely need to go check out more JK Flesh. I've been mixing what will be the penultimate Godflesh album, Decay, for release on Relapse in hopefully July, August. Mixes are being compiled imminently. Okay, so it does sound like that is going to be a studio album. So
yeah,
the curse of every album ever lives on.
Indeed, yeah. This just is for those watching. This episode was the winner of our second poll, and it dominated. It took the lead and didn't lose the lead once throughout the whole month, and that was all like right before this was. That all happened before this was, yeah, so whatever, you know.
Yeah.
you live and learn.
So he goes on, the album is basically done. I've had the final Godflesh studio album written for almost a year and a half now. That will be recorded and completed late 2026. After that, there will continue to be Godflesh dub albums, live albums, and so on, but no new studio releases nor performances. In the near future, a new solo project will emerge, further exploring the parameters of heavy, ugly music, featuring my guitars and electronics, and of course vocals, but not shouted vocals.
Yes.
Thank you for your understanding. Take care out there, Justin.
That sucks. Oh, I feel really bad for him. That's awful all around.
It is really shitty, and my wishes are with him that he does make a total recovery as much as it's possible from that. What I would say is kind of like a little consolation is that I think the stuff that he did with Yezu was amazing, a lot of it. And from the little bit that I've heard as well, it sounds like JK Flesh is really cool too. So as much as I can totally understand, like, anytime you're in a situation where there's something that you do and now you can no longer do it for health reasons, like that just sucks, full stop. But he's demonstrated that he's got the skill to express himself in other ways. So it's heartening for me from that point of view to think that I have no doubt that he's going to be able to keep making great music. It's just unfortunately not going to be loud, shouty Godflesh.
Yeah, that when you don't put out this many great albums, having only one mode. Exactly. Like, I mean, I guess you can make arguments for Motorhead and Slayer for sure, but I mean, even then, there's still some very
even Motorhead, like 1916 is like, it's got like that track in particular is quite different. I mean, not Godflesh. Motorhead had a lot of albums, so they had plenty of material that fit the mode. Yeah, for sure. But you don't put out this many albums with this many exciting and unexpected moments, where if your ability to scream is taken away, all of a sudden that you can't make music. It just he's going to keep making music and it's still going to be great. And thank Christ that he's still alive. Let's just thank God that he's around still. Even if he can't sing, fuck it. It's a damn shame that I'll never see Godflesh live. I am saddened by that a lot. For sure. I'll live though. It's fine. It's okay. I will be all right. It is very interesting to know so far in advance the end of a band. Like, all right, next album, and then one more, and then we're done. Yeah. So there is going to be updated episodes for sure on Godflesh in this year. So that's exciting. But I wouldn't want to like hold our breath. But maybe if we are going to end up having a standalone review, maybe it might be possible to get Justin or Ben for an episode. That would be sick. That would be sick. I don't know whether it's possible or feasible, but I can certainly try the water. Just throw the line out there and see what happens. Yeah, weirder things have happened. You never know. So, and that about does it. That's the end. That was only like 2.5 hours. Yeah, it's easy. That was long time coming. But I am finally completely familiarized with Godflesh. It only took lots and lots of time. Yes, indeed. Yeah, you are definitely no novice when it comes to Godflesh now. You probably know more Godflesh than a lot of like diehard Godflesh fans. I'm sure the comments will be very viscerally disagreeing with you there, but I'll take it. I'm going to be really interested to see what people have to say, like not particularly like, sort of abusive criticism, but I'll just be interested to see what opinions fans have of the band, because we have ended up with quite a varied set of picks
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, I know Godflesh is a band that's really important to a lot of people, so I'll be genuinely interested to see what fans have got to say and what things particularly resonate with them.
Indeed, and settle the debate. Hymns, awesome or not? That's the biggest takeaway I have now. Is like, come on, how is this album not fucking amazing? He says it's the worst. What do you think?
I mean, not least favorite though. Let's just be clear, and
Right.
it does have one of my absolute favorite Godflesh songs on it. So
It is a great song.
I'm very conflicted about that album.
I can't believe it's over. It feels like this journey was never going to end. This is the longest I've spent on one episode, preparing for one episode in so long. Back in the old days with Alex, my former co-host, we would do lots of long discography episodes, and we do them frequently. Sometimes when we'd hit a big one, we'd probably take like 2 or 3 weeks to do it. When Alex left the show, I decided I'm fucking never doing that again. It was exhausting. So whenever we do get a big giant band with a long discography, I'm taking my sweet ass time. So we took like 2 months to do this one. We took a long time to do this one. I didn't want to rush any of it. I wanted to listen to the albums at my pace. I didn't want to get ear fatigue. I wanted to just appreciate the band for what they are. And it was such a better thing to do it that way. I absolutely love this band. It's going to be a minute before I come back to them. I have gotten my fill of Godflesh for a while, but I will remember this time very fondly. And it won't be that. I mean, I'll be back in the summer, I'm sure, re-listening to all this stuff when the new album comes out. But that about does it for this one. Talk some shit in the comments if you haven't already. Like the video. For the love of God, like the video. It's a button. It's easy. It takes no effort on your part other than, I guess, a kind heart. Have a kind heart. Hit the like button. Don't subscribe. Only subscribe if you plan on watching more of my videos. Otherwise, it's a waste of everyone's time. Follow Tom on all social media at Tom Osman Sounds. His music at tomosmansounds.com. His podcast, whatever comes next on YouTube, is also linked to that in the description. And go check him out at New Noise Magazine. Pretty damn cool. You can follow me at Pander Monkey everywhere. My music, Pander Monkey, yada, yada, yada. Last but not least, Patreon, baby. Patreon.com/everyalbumever. There you get bonus episodes. You get to see the schedule in advance. You get to join the Discord, be a part of the community, talk some shit, talk shop, talk music, geek out. Find people that like the weird things that you do, because they're probably not in your local neighborhood. They weren't in mine. They're definitely not in my current one. If you're tier 1, you can suggest any album and I'll do bonus episode reaction reviews on Patreon. If you're tier 2, then you can suggest main feed episodes, longer episodes. If I'm in the mood and if it's a short discography, I'll just make it a full discography episode. Sometimes I'll just do that. And the reason this episode exists, polls. Every month, make a new poll. And I take all of your requests. I take all the requests that you send, tier 1 and tier 2. I throw them on a poll, and you guys decide which one gets a full discography episode. And it's pretty dang cool. So go there, do that. Thank you. But until the next one, see ya.